My parents advised me to go on a trip to Iceland before my marriage. My mom smiled, saying, recharge before the big day. But then my boss sent me a picture of my fiancé's resignation letter, signed by my sister. An hour later, I canceled the flight back, transferred all wedding funds to my name, and sent them a picture from the spa because my name's Sabrina. I'm 34. I was supposed to get married this past July to a man I thought I understood down to the last freckle on his shoulder. We had a venue, guests flying in from 3 different countries, a deposit on a honeymoon in the Amalfi Coast. The works. It wasn't a whirlwind romance, it was slow, intentional, and full of those small moments that make you think, yeah, this is it. I work in project management in Portland, Oregon, and I'm not the type to fall hard or fast. I've always been cautious, some would say clinical, when it comes to relationships. That's probably why everyone breathed a sigh of relief when I got engaged. Sabrina finally found her person, they said. His name was Noel. Kind, nerdy, the kind of guy who sent you articles about whales because he remembered you said you liked marine life once, 3 years ago. He brought my parents flowers every visit. Cooked dinner on Wednesdays. Said all the right things. Never raised his voice. Marla, my younger sister by 4 years, was the opposite of me in nearly every way. Freelance graphic designer, spontaneous, overly emotional, chronically in situationships. But we were close, at least close enough that she was my first pick as maid of honor. I always thought she'd live vicariously through me when it came to marriage. I just never realized how literally she intended that. A few months before the wedding, my parents suggested I take a break. They offered to partially fund a solo trip, anywhere you want, my mom had said, smiling gently over herbal tea. Recharge before the big day. Everyone deserves a breather. I chose Iceland. Always wanted to see the northern lights and the blue lagoon. And it did seem like a great way to mentally prepare for marriage, a quiet before the big storm of lifelong commitment. I landed in Reykjavik with an itinerary full of waterfalls, hot springs, and time set aside to write. I was planning a collection of short stories, something deeply personal I never thought I'd actually finish, let alone publish. But the moment I settled in, something felt off. Noel had been unresponsive to a few of my texts. Not cold, not distant, just delayed. I chalked it up to work stress. The wedding planning had been a lot, and he had mentioned a few weeks prior that he was considering quitting his job. Still, when I got a message from Garrett, my boss, and someone I'd mentored under for the past 6 years, my stomach dropped before I even opened it. Thought this would come through you, but I guess not. Take a look. Attached was a photo of a resignation letter. Written in Noel's handwriting. Dated 2 days prior. The kicker? Signed Noel Winters, witnessed by Marla Gray. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Or a joke. Or something else that wasn't what it actually was. I tried calling Noel. Straight to voicemail. Marla? Same thing. I messaged my mom in a moment of panic. Her response was worse than silence. Sweetheart, we'll talk when you're home. Please don't stress. Just enjoy Iceland. That's when I knew. They knew. Everyone but me knew. My fiancé had quit his job. With my sister at his side. While I was 3,600 miles away. That night I didn't sleep. I sat in the corner of my Airbnb, laptop on my lap, replaying every interaction over the past year. I remembered a time Noel laughed a little too hard at one of Marla's dumb jokes. Or when they shared a bottle of wine when I was sick in bed. Or the way she posted a blurry photo of a home-cooked meal by a friend a month ago, and the plate in the background looked exactly like one of the dishes Noel insisted we only used for guests. I canceled my return flight the next morning. Not because I couldn't face them, but because I didn't want them to see my face. Not yet. Instead, I transferred the full wedding fund, $42,000, from our shared account into my own. I had been the primary contributor anyway, but we had agreed on joint oversight. Fortunately, he never changed the password after we set it up. I sent one text to our wedding planner: event is cancelled. Please apply all non-refundable deposits to the cancellation clause. Do not release further communication to guests yet. Then I checked myself into a luxury spa in Akureyri, ordered the most expensive massage package available, and sent a photo of myself in a robe, sipping champagne, to my family group chat. No caption. No emojis. Just vibes. I turned off my phone for 48 hours. The moment I turned it back on, the flood began. Text after text. Missed calls. A voicemail from Noel that started with "please let me explain," and ended with him begging me to call him back. One message from Marla: I never wanted it to happen this way. We didn't plan it. It just evolved. I'm sorry. That word, evolved, set something off in me. As if their affair was some kind of spiritual journey or unavoidable force of nature. They had evolved into lovers, and I was just the dinosaur left behind. It's hard to explain what it feels like to be betrayed not by one person, but by everyone you trusted. My sister. My fiancé. My parents, who knew, and said nothing. And so I didn't go back. Not to them. Not yet. I made new plans. Once the adrenaline wore off and the heat from the spa's hot stone massage started to fade, I was left with the weight of what had actually happened. It wasn't just betrayal. It was identity collapse. For the first time in years, I had no fiancé, no wedding, and no real connection to the family I had once considered my safest place. I had left Oregon as a soon-to-be wife. I was coming back something else entirely, not just single, but suddenly orphaned by trust. I extended my stay in Iceland by another week. I told no one. I booked small cottages in quiet towns, ate overpriced pastries in silence, hiked near glaciers, and took long, almost punishing walks without checking my phone. I had never traveled alone like that before. At first, it was uncomfortable. Eventually, it became something else, something I hadn't felt in years. Control. Back in Portland, I knew everything would be unraveling without me. Guests wondering where their invites were. Venue coordinators chasing signatures. My father, probably pacing with that frown he wore when the internet went down. My mother, likely crying into a monogrammed napkin. Marla, who even knew? Noel, I imagined, was sleeping beside her by now. Maybe trying to justify it to himself. Maybe playing the victim. He was good at that, crafting stories where he always meant well. Always just trying to do the right thing. He sent me one last email. I read it once, barely. I know you hate me. I don't blame you. I hate me too. But it wasn't fake, Sabrina. We were real. It just stopped fitting the way it used to. I didn't expect to fall for Marla. I wish I could undo it. But I can't. Please don't shut everyone out because of me. What struck me most wasn't the apology, it was the assumption. The assumption that I was shutting people out. That I was reacting emotionally instead of protecting myself from more of their damage. People always tell women that forgiveness is noble. That taking the high road is strength. But there's a difference between forgiveness and self-abandonment. And I had abandoned myself for years, in the name of family loyalty, relationship compromise, being the bigger person. I wasn't going to do that anymore. When I landed back in Portland, I didn't go to our shared rental home. I went to Yara's. Yara had been my best friend since college. A second-gen Lebanese woman with a sharp tongue and the world's softest heart. She opened her door without questions, handed me a glass of red wine, and wrapped me in the kind of hug that didn't ask me to explain anything. We stayed up until 3 a.m. that night. I told her everything. She didn't interrupt once. Just listened, nodded, and finally said, "We burn this crap down, or what?" I laughed for the first time in weeks. The next day, we went to the house. I walked through each room slowly. Noel had already started moving his things out, probably while I was still overseas. Half the books were gone. The shelves I installed last winter were bare. He had even taken the cast iron skillet, which technically had been a Christmas gift to me. I boxed up the rest of his stuff, what little was left, and set it in the garage with a typed note, pick up by Friday. Door code unchanged. After that, donation. I didn't see him. I didn't want to. Instead of mourning the loss of a wedding, I decided to repurpose it. The Timberline Lodge had a strict cancellation policy, but they offered partial credit toward another event. I used it. I sent out a new round of invitations. A carefully crafted message that said, there will no longer be a wedding. But there will still be a gathering. A weekend of reflection, wine, and new beginnings. If you were coming to celebrate love, come still. Just a different kind. Some people thought it was odd. Some didn't respond. But the people who mattered? They came. That weekend at the lodge was one of the most surreal experiences of my life. The guests arrived tentatively, unsure of the tone. Some dressed formally out of habit. Others brought bottles of wine and casseroles like it was a wake. In a way, it was. I stood in front of a room filled with people expecting to see a bride. And I told them the truth. Not every ugly detail, but enough. I told them Noel had left. That Marla was with him. That my parents knew and didn't tell me. That I was hurt, yes, but not broken. And then I told them we weren't here to mourn. We were here to mark a pivot. To honor the version of me who thought her life was figured out, and welcome the one who was about to build something new. The energy in the room shifted. People clapped. A few cried. Claire, my old college roommate, came up to me afterward and said, I've never seen anyone grieve with this much grace. But I'm so sorry you had to. That night we drank and danced. I laughed until my sides hurt. I told stories about the worst dates I'd ever been on, including the time a guy took me to his ex-girlfriend's art show and tried to convince me it was a casual social experiment. I hadn't felt this alive in years. But reality, of course, had to settle eventually. When the weekend was over and everyone drove home, I was left with the question, what now? Noel was gone. Marla was unreachable. My parents were trying to call, leave voicemails, ask to meet in person. I wasn't ready for that. Yara let me stay with her a few more weeks. I slept in the guest room, helped her reorganize her kitchen, offered to pay rent, she refused. I started working remotely again, slowly at first. I told my company I needed time to adjust. They gave it to me, no questions asked. Then, one rainy Sunday morning, I sat down at my laptop. And I opened the document I hadn't touched in nearly a year, the beginning of a book I thought I'd never finish. It was called The Wedding That Wasn't. And this time, the words started pouring out. Writing became my refuge. At first, it was more like a purge. Just long, disorganized paragraphs of feelings I didn't know how to say out loud, fragments of conversations, scenes that kept replaying in my head, lists of the things I lost, and things I never wanted to carry again. It wasn't graceful. It wasn't even particularly good writing. But it was mine. And that felt like enough. 3 weeks passed before I replied to a single message from my parents. They had sent about a dozen between the two of them. My dad's were all short, transactional, please let us know you're safe. We'd like to talk when you're ready. We miss you. My mom's were longer, emotionally messy. She always had more words than he did. She kept calling it a mistake. As if she had tripped and forgotten to tell her daughter that her sister was sleeping with her fiancé. I agreed to meet them in a neutral place, a quiet corner of a cafe near Mount Tabor. They arrived 5 minutes early. I was 15 minutes late. My mom stood up when she saw me. She looked thinner. Or maybe just smaller. My dad stayed seated, hands wrapped tightly around a mug like it was holding him up. I didn't hug them. We made it through pleasantries, sort of. Then silence. Then more silence. It was my mom who broke it first. We didn't know how to tell you, she said. I nodded slowly. So you just didn't? She winced. We thought it would stop. That it was a phase. My dad cleared his throat. We told them it was wrong. Over and over. They said they weren't doing anything inappropriate. I blinked. Until they were? He looked down. My mom reached for my hand. I pulled back instinctively. That hurt her. I could see it. I don't know how to make this right, she whispered. You can't, I said. You just have to live with it. We didn't stay much longer after that. I told them I needed space. Not forever. But longer. I wasn't ready to forgive. And they weren't ready to admit how badly they'd handled it. But at least the pretending had stopped. Marla never reached out again. No apology. No explanation beyond the single pathetic message she sent weeks earlier. Yara told me she'd seen Marla around the Alberta Arts District one afternoon, walking with Noelle, both of them carrying groceries like they were just another ordinary couple. Apparently, she looked visibly pregnant now. That hit me in the gut. Not because I wanted Noelle back, I didn't. But because it all felt so final. Like they had built a new life from the wreckage of mine, and I was the only one still crawling through the debris. It made me angrier than I'd expected. Not the kind of hot, wild anger that burns everything down, that had passed. This was different. It was a slow simmer. A knowing. A clarity. They had chosen themselves. I had to do the same. I moved out of Yara's place shortly after that. Found a one-bedroom apartment in the southeast, near Laurelhurst Park. The kitchen was small, but the light poured in through the windows in a way that made mornings feel like possibility again. I bought a cheap couch, some plants, and a new mattress. Threw away the last remnants of the wedding box I'd kept in storage, save for one journal entry I'd written on the day Noelle proposed. I didn't know why I kept that one page. Maybe because it reminded me how easy it is to believe in something. Even when you shouldn't. The writing continued. It took months, but the manuscript began to take shape. I stopped writing about what happened and started writing around it, the emotional patterns, the silence between words, the feeling of being an extra in your own story. My agent, who I'd worked with years ago on a now-defunct blog project, got her hands on the first draft. She loved it. Raw, layered, unflinching, she said. This isn't just a breakup memoir. It's a mirror for every woman who's ever been asked to shrink to make others comfortable. She started shopping it around quietly. And while that process unfolded in the background, I did something I hadn't done in years. I lived a little. Not extravagantly. Not dramatically. I joined a women's hiking group. I took a ceramics class on Thursday nights. I reconnected with Claire and her toddler and spent lazy Sundays baking banana bread that always came out slightly overcooked but still edible. Yara introduced me to her circle of artist friends, one of whom, a quiet, bearded guy named Jonah, invited me to an open mic night. I read a short piece. Not about Noelle. Not about betrayal. Just about a girl trying to plant lavender in the rain. They clapped. It felt like exhaling after years of holding my breath. Still, the ghosts lingered. Sometimes I'd catch myself glancing at couples in grocery stores and wondering if they were happy, actually happy, or just performing. I'd flinch when I heard my sister's name. I avoided my old neighborhood entirely. Certain restaurants were no-go zones. But the flinching became less frequent. The waves of grief came slower. I started making space for new things, even while the old ones still cast shadows. And through it all, the story kept unfolding. Not just in the book, but in me. A few months later, I was invited to a small industry conference in Seattle. Nothing too glamorous, a weekend of panels and networking mixers, the kind of thing I used to attend regularly without a second thought. But this time I hesitated. Not because I didn't want to go. I did. but because everything in my life had been so insular since returning from Iceland. Quiet. Controlled. Safe. This would mean putting myself out there again. Not just professionally, but socially. Emotionally. Still, I packed a weekend bag, printed some updated materials for a talk I was giving on remote project management post-pandemic, and got in my car. The drive to Seattle was foggy, uneventful. But my chest felt tight the whole way. The first night of the conference, I sat at a round table with 6 strangers and one familiar face. Nico. Not ex in the dramatic, heart-shattering sense. More like a soft ending that never fully resolved. We'd dated in our late 20s. Had great conversations, decent chemistry, but terrible timing. He'd wanted to move abroad. I had just landed a promotion. We parted ways with mutual understanding and a leftover Spotify playlist we both still followed. He smiled when he saw me. Sabrina? I blinked. Wow. I didn't even know you still worked in consulting. I don't. Not really. I freelance now. Mostly in UX coaching. He motioned to the seat beside him. You want to sit? We talked for 3 hours that night. About everything except what had happened to me in the last year. Not because I was hiding it, just because I didn't feel the need to lead with my trauma. For the first time in a while, I was just me. Not the woman who got betrayed, not the bride left behind, not the cautionary tale. Just a person. At a table. With someone who remembered who I was before everything cracked. He asked me to grab breakfast the next morning. We ate French toast and talked about the books we'd both read lately. He'd been working on a screenplay. I told him about my manuscript. Fiction or memoir, he asked. Somewhere in between, I said, stirring my coffee. It started one way. Then it started telling me what it wanted to be. He smiled. Sounds like the best kind of writing. When I got back to Portland, I found myself checking my phone more often than usual. Nico had sent me a few photos from the conference, including one where we were laughing, not posed, not staged. Just laughing. I stared at it for longer than I should have. Still, I didn't let myself spiral. This wasn't a fairy tale reboot. It was just a reminder that connection still existed. That not every story ended in betrayal. That there were still people in the world who could see you without wanting to own or fix you. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost normal. My agent called. A publisher was seriously interested. There were edits to be made, yes, and a long road ahead, but it was real. Tangible. I cried in the middle of my kitchen when I got the news. Then I opened a bottle of wine I'd been saving for the wedding. Funny how life hands you new reasons to celebrate. One day, I ran into a mutual acquaintance of Noelle and Marla's at the farmer's market, a woman named Kim who used to work with Marla on design projects. We'd always been cordial, nothing more. She looked surprised to see me. Wow. Sabrina. You look great. Thanks, I said carefully. She hesitated. Then, softly, I don't know if you've heard, but Noelle and Marla are moving to Tampa. Her pregnancy's been a little complicated, and her mom's sister lives there. They're getting help. I didn't say anything for a moment. Then, I hope it works out for them. And I meant it. Not because I wanted to reconcile or forgive or pretend nothing had happened. But because I didn't want to carry their unhappiness anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was just tired of holding things that didn't belong to me. After that conversation, I started doing something small but symbolic every week. I threw something out. A pair of earrings Noelle had given me that I never really liked. An old notepad filled with wedding checklist scribbles. A sweater Marla left at my place once during a weekend visit. I don't even know why I'd kept it this long. Each item gone felt like another brick off my back. There was no dramatic shift. No lightning bolt of healing. Just little steps. Reclaimed space. The wedding that never happened stopped being a ghost and became a story I could control, something I could shape instead of something that shaped me. But I still hadn't returned to the house. The one Noel and I had shared. It was still vacant, the lease under my name, the rent month to month now. I hadn't decided what to do with it yet. I'd avoided the street altogether, taking longer routes just to sidestep the weight of what it used to be. One night, after a long walk through Laurelhurst, I found myself there anyway. It was dusk. Quiet. A few porch lights flickered on in neighboring homes. I stood outside the gate for a long time. Then I unlocked the door and stepped inside. It smelled like dust and faint cedar, the kind of scent that lingers in places once filled with life. Everything had been cleared out, but the bones of it remained. The indents in the carpet where our old couch had been. A small scratch on the kitchen tile from the time Noel dropped a wine bottle. I walked room to room. Not to say goodbye, exactly. But to remember that I'd lived here. That I had laughed here. That before everything fell apart, I had built a life. And that life, flawed and incomplete as it was, deserved to be honored. I turned off the lights one by one. Locked the door behind me. And left. I had no intention of revenge. At least, not the kind you see in movies. I wasn't going to ruin anyone's life or air dirty laundry online. I didn't want chaos or confrontation. What I wanted, what I needed, was to make sure they knew that I didn't just survive what they did to me. I outgrew it. Still, life has a way of delivering poetic timing when you least expect it. The publisher set the release date for my memoir, The Wedding That Wasn't, spring of the following year. It had gone through 5 rounds of editing, a cover design I cried over, in a good way, and a marketing strategy that hinged on me telling my story in pieces, not as a sob story, but as something empowering, almost universal. The book didn't name names. It didn't need to. Anyone who had been in my orbit would read between the lines. That was intentional. One of the final suggestions from my publisher was to consider doing a small launch event in Portland. An in-person reading. Maybe a Q&A, something intimate and open to the public. I said yes. We booked a local independent bookstore. A beautiful space with exposed brick walls and a reading nook strung with soft Edison bulbs. We printed simple flyers. The event was listed online. A handful of early readers shared posts. Word spread. I didn't think Marla would show up. Or Noel. But I didn't not think about it, either. The night of the event, I stood in the back corner with a cup of chamomile tea, heart pounding like I was about to walk down the aisle again, only this time, I wasn't heading toward a future with someone else. I was standing fully in mine. People filtered in. Familiar faces. Colleagues. Old classmates. Yara, of course, front row center. My editor. A few strangers who had seen the ad and were curious. And then, 5 minutes before it started, I saw them. Marla. Noel. Sitting near the back. Marla looked different. She had that tired new mom expression, smudged makeup, nervous eyes. Noel looked thinner, paler, like the weight of trying to hold up their new life had started to wear on him. They didn't wave. I didn't either. I stepped up to the podium. Thank you all for coming, I said. This isn't just a book launch. It's a milestone. A line in the sand between who I used to be and who I am now. I read a passage from the book. Not the beginning, not the worst part. But the part where I described standing in a spa in Iceland, deleting a return flight and choosing, for the first time, not to chase an explanation. I realized in that moment that peace isn't what people give you after they've hurt you, I read aloud. Peace is what you build when you stop letting their choices define your identity. The audience was silent. And then they clapped. After the reading, people came up to talk. Hug me. Ask questions. Tell me their own stories. Marla didn't approach me. Neither did Noel. But I saw them watching. It was enough. A few weeks later, I received a handwritten letter. No return address, but the handwriting was unmistakable. Marla. She said she read the book. Said it gutted her. She apologized again. Said she didn't expect me to respond. That she and Noel were no longer together, it wasn't what either of us thought it would be. She admitted she'd romanticized the idea of being chosen, never considering the cost of what was being taken. It wasn't the apology I once would have begged for. But it was better than nothing. I didn't write back. I didn't need to. My book was gaining traction. Sales were climbing. I was invited to speak at a women's summit in Vancouver. Book clubs were discussing it. A podcast interviewed me. One called it the anti-romance memoir for the modern woman. And best of all? The wedding venue, the very one that would have hosted the ceremony, contacted me 6 months later. They were starting a new campaign highlighting women who had transformed personal turning points into growth stories. They offered to feature me in their print magazine. Not for a wedding. For reinvention. They asked if I wanted to come back and shoot a short piece there, tell my story, walk through the space. I agreed. I stood under the same arch I would have said vows beneath and instead talked about resilience, writing, and freedom. It aired online. Thousands saw it. I received a message the next morning from a former college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. Saw the video. You look luminous. So proud of how you've turned everything around. You're kind of a badass. I smiled. Because it was true. My revenge wasn't loud or cruel or vindictive. It was living well. It was writing the story myself, every sentence, every chapter, after they tried to rip the pen from my hand. It was standing on a stage, in the light, while they sat in the back, watching the woman they tried to break become someone unstoppable. It wasn't just the wedding that didn't happen. It was the woman I didn't become, the one who would have kept shrinking, forgiving, pretending, and the one I did.